On this rainy Friday night, with a severe thunderstorm approaching from the southwest, I bring you music that I love so much I simply don't have words for it. It's one of Maurice Ravel's later chamber compositions, his Sonata for Violin and Cello, completed in 1922 and dedicated to the memory of Claude Debussy. Although much in this music is at least vaguely familiar from earlier acquaintance with his string quartet, his introduction and allegro, and his piano trio, all works composed between 1903 and 1914, this music is mostly new and strikingly different from what we heard in those earlier works. Of course, during the 8 years that lie between the last of those and this sonata, Ravel's wartime experience, along with personal tragedy, had a profound impact on his understanding of what music is and what it might and ought to say. Hey, Polly. Knowing as I do that music this acerbic is simply not going to be to everyone's liking, especially for those who like their music smooth around the edges and recognizably tonal, I want to say a few words about how I listen to this music and ask you to consider trying it. Even though I know this work through and through, I remind myself every time I listen to it that I must not bring certain preconceptions about music to the experience. A great deal of the music is either bimodal or bitonal, often both, and there are passages that can only be described as atonal. Much of it could easily be mistaken for Bartók. So my advice is, don't listen for familiar resolutions, thus avoiding disappointment when you don't hear them. Don't expect to be able to settle into an unambiguously identifiable key. It's just not going to happen. So clear your head and let Ravel speak directly to you. Accept the taut, hard-edged, uncushioned sound of two naked stringed instruments being bowed and plucked as if in the hands of either uneasy, somewhat suspicious allies or mortal enemies. Nod in agreement wherever appropriate. Expect nothing but the magic that little by little emerges from the experience. Enjoy the hell out of that whacked-out scherzo and that amazing finale, and let yourself get lost in that wonderful slow movement. Consider smoking a joint before you begin. I often do. The sonata takes the four-movement symphonic shape heard also in the earlier quartet and trio. It is cyclic with a vengeance. About the only thing I can tell you about the overall tonal design is that it begins in A minor and ends in C major, but don't make too much of that. As far as general formal plans go, the first movement hews closely to the sonata plan. The scherzo is through composed in discrete sections. The slow movement is an ABA form arch, and the finale is a rondo. The opening movement begins in modal ambiguity, with the violin bowing low arches with an A minor ascent and an A major descent. Above this curious bimodal ostinato figure floats a mournful A Dorian tune high in the cello, and after a few inconclusive measures, the roles are reversed for a second statement at the subdominant. The bimodal ostinato will appear in other movements, being one of two motives knitting the whole together. The other is a jagged, dissonant-sounding sequence of falling major sevenths, a motive best described as atonal and even destined to be fleshed out into an almost complete 12-tone row near the end of the finale. The second theme is a lovable thing, a free-ranging white-key diatonic melody whose harmonization by the cello is offset by a half beat, yielding one of the most syncopated themes I've ever encountered. This beautiful theme is built to a towering climax and subsides in a peaceful closing. The development emerges organically and, in the spirit of this sonata overall, is thoroughly through composed, taking a clearly narrative shape overall. The return of the main theme at the recap is no longer cloaked in modal ambiguity. It thus sounds more settled than earlier. The recapitulation is mostly regular, although there are interesting variants you'd want to take note of. The movement's haunting coda ends on a whispered stratospheric tonic major chord. The scherzo movement has to be one of the most entertaining I know. I find it useful to deal with it in 4 sections plus a coda. The opening section begins with the same kind of bimodal ostinato figure that opened and permeated movement 1, now divided between the 2 plucked instruments at a brisk tempo and with the modality reversed, now a major ascent and a minor descent. This is grown out in various ways through some fairly broad paragraphs, with a saucy pizzicato theme finally emerging on the violin, a taunting, comical thing. As if to underscore the comedy, the 7th motive from the first movement's transition comes charging in, harmonized, and quickly clears the stage. The 2nd section begins with the same ostinato in the cello alone, now in C major with occasional chords for punctuation, worked out at length before the violin comes charging in with one of the oddest tunes imaginable, just 3 long-held notes really in apparent D-sharp minor. The roles are reversed anon with everything a whole step higher, and the cello's 3-note tune apparently in F-sharp major, but who can say for sure? These relations tug the ear this way and that as the music gallops along. That's what's so endlessly entertaining about it. The 3rd section is agitating in the extreme. Fast, trilled patterns in several different bitonal configurations growing more fraught as it unfolds, with that atonal 7th motive bursting in and finally taking over. Then a respite, a reprieve, still bitonal but relaxed, and due to give way almost immediately to that furious galloping impulse that has driven this scherzo from the beginning, and now drives it into a hair-raising coda with an oddly whimsical ending. If you wanted to pause the video after this movement and let your pulse settle back to a semblance of normality, I'd understand completely. The 3rd movement is a broad ABA form arch, its agitated and climactic central section framed by serene chant-like music of childlike simplicity. The unhurried opening A minor melody is played by cello alone, tracing tall melodic arches and contriving to end an octave above its starting point, where the violin takes over for a 2nd statement. The cello continues playing, now contributing a spare counter-melodic harmonization that sounds a touch medieval. The transition soon turns gorgeous with chromatic harmony and enters a period of crisis, a foretaste of things to come, before yielding to the violin's broken octave B-flat pedal point, and the cello's mournful pentatonic B theme sung in A major, echoed artfully by the violin in a suave voice exchange. After a 2nd statement, this beautiful theme is subjected to a development so chromatic, so reduced to pure melody without regard to one note's relation to any other, that it might be reckoned the closest to atonal music that Ravel ever composed. The climax of this passage is shattering, and I simply don't have words for what follows it. When the opening theme returns, it is set in a new, more homophonic context, lovelier than it might have been thought at first. The coda is a tall arch, its ascending limb based on this movement's transition, and its descending limb bringing back the 7th motive from the first movement's transition and working it out to one of the most haunting endings you'll ever hear. The finale is just brilliant, a furiously unfolding rondo movement with a mixed meter ricochet idea to frame its several episodes, building and building toward what seems, once one gets there, inevitable all along, a harrowing fugue on that atonal sevenths figure from the opening movement, now put through all kinds of fancy paces and precipitating the most percussive grinding coda you'd ever want to experience, topped off with a cocksure C major final cadence. What to make of it all, I do not know. I only know that I find this some of the most engaging music I've ever heard, and treating it to this examination has been a pure pleasure. This beautiful recording is of a live performance, a ghost concert given June 3, 2020 in the Kammermusiksaal of the Philharmonie Berlin. The artists are Johanna Pichelmeier, violin, and Anne Umino Weber, cello. I will furnish a link in the description below so that you can watch these extraordinary musicians play this wonderful music.